And welcome to the Great Deception Podcast. I'm your host, Matt. Thanks for joining me. Tonight, we have a return guest. It's going to be fantastic. I got a little housekeeping to do first. I want to thank our newest patrons. We have two new members of the family. We have Jason and Jarrett. Guys, welcome aboard, and thank you for joining. And on that note, Friday, and then next Friday, so this Friday, which is, what is that, the 25th, I believe, and then December 2nd, we will have two patrons only calls. So anyone that wants to hop on in the Patreon, we will have two of them. It's going to be fun. Always great discussions, great people. And tonight's guest is one of them. So, guys, we just wrapped up the Chicago Fire episodes, right? Pesh to go, all that chaos that went on in the Midwest in 1871. Well, our guest tonight, Mr. Matthew Smith, back again. He and I have been talking about the fires, and he found something that blew my mind. So, Matthew, welcome back, my friends.
How are you doing, Matt? It's good to be back.
I'm so happy to be here tonight. I have had one of those. My son's been battling a flu all week, so I've been playing nurse, and the uniform does not fit me well, right? I got big old thighs, and it's just too tight. So I finally get to relax and do a little old world tonight with you. So how you been?
I've been good. Kind of the same thing here. My youngest boy has been really sick all week. He's been dogged and just sitting in his room, kind of fighting fevers and hacking up ungodly things. And my wife just got sick, and I can feel my throat's getting a little scratchy. So we'll get through this together.
I got to get you the recipe for this quinine mixture that my buddy Ghost over at the My Third Eye podcast, he has this concoction, and it's a couple of fruits, and you mix it up. While my son's been sick the whole time, I've been taking shots of this all day, and I feel great. So knock on wood.
Yeah, good for you.
I'd like we'll get
a hold of that recipe. We've been hitting the ivermectin.
Ooh, the horse dewormer.
The horse dewormer. Yes. Cleaning out our systems, purging.
Hey, that's the way but that's what this time of year is, right? That's what flu season is. It's not, virus season. It's our body shedding. We're supposed to go through this, and it's part of the process. And anybody that doesn't detox, you're in for a wild ride, because it's just going to build up, and then it's going to hit you eventually, right?
Yeah, and what the nice thing about being sick this year as opposed to the last 2 years is you don't have people harping on you to go get tested.
It was amazing. I was allowed to go to my son's parent-teacher conference, even though I was in direct contact with someone who has the flu.
You heathen.
And I wasn't a super spreader. Go figure.
Well, Matt, where do you want to begin here?
I want to hear about your little visit to in Seattle today, about the old Seattle fires, because that, my friend, when we were texting about that before, I'm like, oh man, this is awesome.
Well, so I was out in Ellensburg, which is a small town in central Washington state. I live near Seattle, but I was out there seeing a holistic doctor, a friend of mine, and getting a treatment. I was just wandering around town afterwards. And they have an old museum, an old historic museum. So I thought, well, I'll stop in here. I've got some time to kill. And wouldn't you know it, as soon as I walked in the door, they had a display of old downtown Ellensburg that, wouldn't you know it, was burned down by a very mysterious arson fire. They consider it arson, but an unsolved mystery. They don't know who and how. But their downtown was burned to the ground in 1889. And what they told me was that Ellensburg was a contender for to become the first capital, or to become the capital of Washington state. Now, Washington became a state in 1889, and turns out Ellensburg burned down a month after Seattle's Great Fire. And a year before, downtown Spokane burned down. And Spokane is the other big city, in addition to Tacoma. Uh, Spokane is the big city on the eastern flank of the state. And so all of these cities burned to the ground at the same time that Washington gained its statehood. So I found that to be pretty interesting. So here I picked up this gem.
Oh, I didn't realize those books existed. They
These
have
are
them for
great.
like every small town in America now.
These are great. So the mysteries, you open it up and the mysteries just start jumping out at you. This is downtown Ellensburg, this little shanty bill in
Okay.
1886. But this building, this exquisite castle like office building, whatever this is, was built in 1890.
What?
And when you look at the
What
pictures,
purpose?
that's a good question. It's the State Normal School.
Get out. That's a school. You're
It's
going to build a
the normal
castle for a school. Oh
So,
my God.
so it's the same story. It's the same story as all of the other burnt out cities. But it burned in 1889. And when I started looking, I started seeing old stone and brick buildings, not wooden shanties, in the photos of the burned out downtown. And here's another one.
Wow.
Now,
Yeah.
this is old world building.
Yeah. That's brick and
So,
stone right there.
so the woman, and so this is another example of the type of architecture that was there. So somehow it magically went within a few years to wooden shanties, to this stuff, burned down at the same time Washington became a state. And then they quickly rebuilt it. And the local historian is a very nice local woman. She was very eager to share the history with me. And she was saying that the bricks burned so hot that they melted like candle wax straight out of the horse's mouth.
Wow.
And that it was such a hot fire that it was seen across the valley all the way to Yakima, which is about 40 miles as the crow flies.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a pretty mighty fire caused by, we don't know.
Arson. I mean, come
Some
on.
say.
Like, I mean, think about that. It goes back to Mrs. O'Leary's cow in Chicago. I mean, it's come on. You're telling me this was like a brush fire, like or somebody knocked over a candle, or it's like
The fire was so intense, she said, that it created its own tornadoes. And so debris was being swept up by these fire nados and found on the outskirts of the town in the countryside in the aftermath of the fire. I mean, what would cause an inferno like that?
Yeah. And to get that tornadic activity, right? It's like the hurricanes that we heard about in 1871. They were talking about these fire hurricanes that were whipping through. And it's you think about it, what would be the cause, right? We can understand it actually functioning, but what causes that? How does that generate? And that's been a mystery, and that's something they never even explained in Chicago. I mean, there was a giant cyclone storm that stretched from basically like on the eastern side of Michigan all the way out to the Pacific Ocean, and then from up to Oregon down to Texas. I mean, we're talking like 3/4 of America was covered by some effect of this these cyclonic winds that were just so happened to be on that day.
Yeah, and so it could be a natural cataclysm, but I find it to be very curious that all of our, our important cities here in Washington State, before as it became a state in the same year,
within a year, Matthew, right?
within a
All
year,
three.
they all burned down in the downtown district.
At the same time, your state, became a state. So what are they going to do now? Now you're going to start putting up government buildings, right? You're going to start putting up all this administrative stuff And it's almost like, okay, who's got the best bid for us? Who's
And
going to give us the
imagine all the old records were lost. No,
gone?
who knows who owns what?
Yep.
Deeds, property, papers, documents, all gone.
And like we saw in Chicago also, when that happens, right? When you see these massive fires and all the records are burned, the other thing you start seeing now is when the insurance companies get involved, now you start seeing building codes. So now those people that owned that land previously, or those structures previously that were wooden structures or whatever, they can't afford to rebuild because of the cost of the code. So now they have to sell their land and basically on the cheap at a loss. And who comes in to sweep it up? Usually those guys in the black hats,
Guys
those
in the
bowler
black hats
hats.
rolling out the new electrical grid and getting rid of the old world. It seems like the perfect recipe for a great reset.
And we see it in almost every major city, right across America in the 1800s and early 1900s. I mean, it's comical because you get to like the mid 1900s and the fires stop. These massive fires. And granted, okay, we upgraded the code and we have better fire departments and stuff. But if these fires are on the scale of this and are caused by natural things, why don't we see them today?
And why
Other
don't
than
we hear about it?
California.
Why did we all grow up just hearing about the great, fire of Chicago? And why is it just missing from like our historical narrative?
Or San Francisco, right? The Great Quake. I mean, I heard about that, but then I never heard about the World Fair they built right after it. It's one after another. And you're right. It's not only the architecture, it's the records. And that's a huge part that people lose. When they burn these courthouses down, when they burn these public buildings down, all records are lost. There's no
Yeah,
backups. There's
there's
no
no
hard
digital
drives
files.
that they have them on. They're gone. And now, and one of the things we did see in Chicago was there was a couple people that would go in and they were just, their whole thing was just to get as many records out as possible and take them with them. And then like people were so thankful. They saved a lot of people's livelihoods by saving those records, because otherwise they're at the mercy of the market afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. And so maybe we can make this a whole another episode, but I also found this gem at a local bookstore.
that is a topic I am down for, because underground Seattle, above ground Seattle is a mystery to me.
Yes. And so there's a lot of archival photos in here. There's a panoramic photo of Seattle in 1900, and it's just like the beautiful, that panoramic photo in San Francisco showing an old world city that's completely built out. That just doesn't line up with the timelines of when.
And what year did you say that was?
The photo is from 1900, but again, it's a city that was burned down in 1889.
Yeah, just 11 years prior.
Yeah.
Yep. And has a massive amount of underground tunnels.
It's not just tunnels. It's an actual underground city.
Well, like city,
It's a downtown underground.
Yeah.
With storefronts, and the old signage is still there. So they finished building the city after a great fire, and then decided that they built it too low and had to raise up the street level. It's very mysterious, Matt.
That's another thing they mastered in the mid and late 1800s. They could just pick up anything and move it.
Well, they had levitation back then, didn't they?
Yeah. Like the Coral Castle guy.
Mm-hmm.
You want to what you have a presentation for us tonight, huh?
I do.
I love it. I am a visual guy, so anyone that brings visuals is a friend of mine.
All right. Well, maybe we can try to describe these images as well as we go, for the people that are just listening to the audio, because it is a visual heavy presentation. I think graphically, and like I explained to you earlier, I try to catch up with images with words. I try to catch up to the imagery with words, but it's just the way my mind works. I'm an architect, a designer, and so I throw the images out there and then try to explain them as we go. So we'll have a go at it. The premise of this is a little background information. The last time we talked, we spoke about American rock cement found in old world American architecture that was comparable in quality and longevity to Roman cement, as opposed to the cheap and brittle conglomerate Portland cement that made the New World. We discussed its potentiality to be conductive, to have piezoelectric properties due to its high silica content, also known as quartz. And we looked at the engineering of rock cement mining, the masterful engineering of the rock cement in the mines that were rediscovered in recent decades, for instance, at the Widow Jane mine in Roslyn, New York, as well as many other locations throughout our land. And when they rolled out the modern era, to remind people that's when they started using this Portland cement, importing it. And it was just this cheaper conglomerate, very brittle material by comparison. And so recently, Matt, we started looking at bricks and how bricks are now being studied as to be used as batteries due to their high iron content. And so that's outlined in this Scientific American article that you shared with me, titled "Bricks Can Be Turned into Batteries." Who knew? So this raises the compelling question, did our ancestors already have this technology or some variation of it?
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because I was just reading, I just picked up this book. It's called Fire and Stone, and it's about old star forts. And it was talking about how they were working on the masonry and how they had mastered the ability to do sublevels. And it was because of the Roman cement. And I remember when you mentioned last time that the Roman cement actually, it was waterproof in a sense. And what they said in it, they actually gave a makeup of it. They say the waterproof cement for cisterns, foundations, and underground chambers was usually composed of a mixture of 2 parts unslacked lime, 1 part sand, and 1 part pulverized terrace, a stone of volcanic origin, which was quarried in the Rhineland.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so it says, when no terrace was to be had, a passable substitute was provided by burning and pulverizing tiles. So they're almost using ceramic.
Huh.
At that point. So I found that really interesting. And it all, all these things are all starting to tie in and finding little bits and pieces. But that really drew my interest after talking about the American cement last time and how similar it was to the Roman. And to actually see a high level recipe of it, I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Interesting, man. So I'm fascinated. I've long been fascinated by this idea that old world architecture and sacred structures in particular have some innate quality, some characteristics that actually just the buildings themselves and the spaces that they create elevate the human spirit, body, and mind. That there's some quality. So I've been down this rabbit hole for some time, and I'm super excited to share this presentation with you. And so what I'm trying to do is bring together 2 areas of interest of mine. One is this old world architecture area of research, and then the other is electric universe theory. And so
that's one of our buddy Random Randy's favorite topics. He's got that down, and we got to get with him and sit down and have a chat about that.
Yeah, I would love to talk to Randy about it. there's a group called the Thunderbolts Project on YouTube, and that I would recommend anybody and everybody that's interested in this subject to go and just pour through their videos and documents. And they've been at this for decades, and they do a really good job of presenting. It's an alternative physics, an alternative cosmology. I could say it's an alternative physics that supports an alternative cosmology, but it's also one that lends itself to comparative mythology, because they look at the old myths as eyewitness events, as basically historic records, not just fairy tales. The old mythologies and religions, and they've gone back and studied the mythologies of the world, and they connect dots which point to the idea that much of what was being recorded in these ancient sacred texts were actual eyewitness events at a time when our atmosphere was a lot more highly charged electrically. And they look at the work of Velikovsky, who wrote books such as Worlds in Collision. And he talks about how, and this was, I guess, starting in the 1950s. And he talks about how the solar system is not this stable clockwork that, Newton would have believed, for instance, that it's actually subject to change over time. And when the celestial bodies, when the planetary bodies move around, well, interesting things happen in the skies, to say the least.
Well, and it's interesting you say that, because the calendars back in the day, one calendar system was based on the lunar movement, and then one was based on the solar, and those two calendars differed. And I always found that interesting, because I just started diving back into the Book of Enoch, and that's one of the things they explain in the beginning is the calendars, and the Enochian calendar, and the you had the Hebrew calendar, and there was one other calendar at the time, but that was one of the things they talked about, how the patterns were different, so the years were off, and they had to add on things to get them to line up.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that they really emphasize is that there's this idea of the golden dawn of civilization, known as the Purple Dawn, and that at one time in human memory, Saturn actually was our sun, and then the Earth was within the what do you call it, the heliosphere, of Saturn. And then things changed, and it was catastrophic, and there was all sorts of catastrophes, and again, when planets move around, there's electrical discharges, plasma discharges between them, and it's a very deep rabbit hole in itself, and I'm a student of it. I'm by no means an expert. I try to follow along, but the part of it that really captivates me is just this basic idea that the universe, that reality, is electrical in nature, and that gravity is definitely not the strongest organizing force in the universe. That gravity is basically it's a weak force, but it's a subset of electrical properties. And we're gonna get into this. And so when I look at megalithic architecture and old world architecture, I think a big missing piece for this whole field of research is this question of electric universe theory, or plasma physics, because we're looking at resonance. When we look at a cathedral or we look at a sacred building, we're looking at, they say, was it the Goethe quote that architecture is frozen music? Well, it really is that. It's resonance, frequency, and vibration, frozen in stone and glass and precious metals. So we're going to expound on that. So the presentation that I'm going to make will attempt to show that sacred structures and cathedrals in particular are indeed electromagnetic field generators. And in addition to the electric properties of old world cement, brick, and stone, we have, just by the very nature of these buildings, by their actual geometry, by their sacred geometry, we have structures that are capable of channeling etheric energies into their occupants.
Sorry, my mic was on mute. My son just called. I apologize.
Would you like to pause and take your son's call?
Oh, no, we're good. I just got him. He forgot I called him.
Real life in the raw.
Yeah, this is podcasting live and in the raw, because this not getting it out. But I'm with you. The sacred geometry aspect is, you see it everywhere, right? It's not just in the buildings either. It's in everything in life. And I've had some experiences on mushrooms where you go out and you just start seeing these patterns everywhere. It's just sacred geometry everywhere. And then you start noticing it in everything. You look at the flowers, you look at the tree, and it's like the building block, that's the source, it seems like. And that's where we get all of our energy out of.
Yeah, I think those plant medicines, we'll call them entheogens, I think they're there to sort of unlock our consciousness to start to see these patterns and I mean, that's been my experience too with mushrooms, or more recently gotten into ayahuasca. And I do believe that. I think that when you're under the influence, you're able to perceive etheric field, etheric field.
And that's one thing I noticed is that, you notice that etheric field around you and you feel it more. You're in tune with it almost. I think, a lot of this, the frequencies that we're beaten down with, and just the general way of living now, we've detached from that. And that's where the big disconnect is. And we say it all the time. I mean, that's something I've reiterated over and over again. I feel like the old world, and when I talk about the old world, it's that connection with nature. They were in tune with nature. Everything was natural. Now everything is forced. It's not natural. We've gone so in the opposite. We've done a 180. We're the opposite of natural. We're into the fake. Fake is what is in this era.
Disconnected is the operative word there.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the age of modernity, has disconnected us from each other. They got rid of the ether. They tried, they insist that it doesn't exist. Well, I think they're just flat out wrong or lying. So under mushrooms, or in my case, not experimenting, but working with ayahuasca, we regain that sense of connectivity to each other as human beings, to the world around us, to the cosmos. Not to get too woo, but that's just how it is, right?
Yep. Oh, without a doubt. I mean, and I'm trying to pull up a couple pictures here that I wanted to, no, that's the wrong one, I think. Let's see. Yeah, that's Dante.
And Matt, keep in mind, and this is critical with this electric universe theory, and just kind of understanding what we're getting on about with our trip experiences. they say that plasma is the fourth state of matter. We have solid, liquid, and gas, and also plasma gets like honorable mention. But plasma is the essential state of matter. Plasma is like 99+% of all matter in the universe is plasma. The sun is a ball of plasma and the source of all of our life. And so, in the visible spectrum that we perceive with our eyes, it's just a narrow sliver of the full spectrum of light. So there's a lot of stuff going on around us all the time that we're just not able to perceive with our basic senses as narrowed down to get by in the modern world.
And that's the thing that people don't understand. They think that they see everything, that everything around them that they can perceive. And it's like, no, how much can you really see here? I mean, that's something that I don't think people really understand, is that our perception of what is in this world is so slim. I mean, we're barely looking through slits in a hole in the wall to see out. And you get people who, are talking down on things like, what are you looking at? Things like ghosts, apparitions, spirits, demons. It's possible they exist and we just can't see them.
Sure, absolutely. Entities of all sorts are out there. In different cultures. Graham Hancock wrote a book called I think it's called Supernatural, and he goes through different cultures and different times and compares their myths of fairies and wee folk to, like, today people refer to alien abduction, this and that, but the story neatly with each other. It's just that there's just a different sensibility for the modern age. And we don't talk about fairies, but people talk about having encounters with aliens, and that just might be the way we interpret things when we have encounters with things that aren't just part of the like the material realm, as again, as our senses have been narrowed down just to perceive a sliver of it. And see, that's the other thing, Matt. I want to put this out there, that modern scientism has, they've separated science and spirituality.
Yes.
To such an extent that, well, we're suffering from it. I think that we're suffering as a society greatly, because of this sort of atheistic approach to understanding the nature of reality. And I think that's and I'm talking as somebody who was, an atheist for 20 years. I grew up Christian, and then I rejected all of that and embraced atheism because I thought that was cool and smart. And then, again, with mushrooms and ayahuasca, I quickly realized, you can't explain what's going on here through atheism. There's way more to this mystery of life. I mean, how do you get from non-life to life in the first place?
Exactly. Well, that's the thing. And the atheists, who do they always hate? They hate God. Well, that's totally backwards, because how do you hate something that doesn't exist?
Well, that's just father issues, I think.
Oh yeah, it totally is. And I went through an atheist, what I would call, I for most of my life I was agnostic, because every time I went to church I had nothing but a bad experience as a child, or and growing up. So that turned me off to religion, but I always felt like there was something. Right. So I was kind of agnostic. Then I got into like high school, early college, and I went through an atheist period where I'm like, oh, there's no God. There can't be any God. The material world is great, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden I had the awakening, and I'm like, oh, shit. I'm like, no. There's no way all of this has happened without a creator.
And the idea too with, and again, I'm going to keep referring back to this electric universe theory, the idea that life essentially is plasma in nature, which is electrical in nature. And so this idea this sort of modern scientific idea that consciousness comes out of the mind. These firing synapses produces, they're able to combine in such a way as to produce consciousness. Well, that's a mystery, how that could happen. But I think, so I've arrived at the understanding that, we exist within consciousness. All of life exists within consciousness. Call it the mind, call it the ether, call it God, call it light. There's lots of names for it. But we all exist within that. And so that our minds, our brain acts more as a receiver to what's out there. And so we can tune ourselves up and plug ourselves into it if we so choose. And again, these sacred structures, I think that's what they're for. They're there to help us tune ourselves to a higher consciousness, to the divine.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. Absolutely. I think that anything that is built with using these sacred geometric patterns, I feel like it has a whole different feel to it. It has a whole different intention behind it. And that's a lot of it too. I mean, when you think about the architecture nowadays, the intention behind it is cheap, quick, efficient.
Disposable.
Yeah, disposable. That's the best. Is just, and I mean, it's brutal. It's called that for a reason. I mean, it's just, and you think about it and it's mind blowing, because I don't understand how people can't see this and how people can't,
Well, because our consciousness has been lowered.
Yes. But I guess it was a rhetorical question. Right. Because it is obvious. And it's funny because I've been having this conversation a lot lately with people, trying to get them to understand, because people are getting frustrated with not being able to connect with certain people. And I've heard over and over again on different, and it presented in different formats, that, listen, you have to understand we're all on different frequencies. So say you're trying to listen to the radio where you are, but that radio station, you can't pick it up. So no matter how much you try and dial it in, you're not going to tune into that frequency. You're not going to get it. So when you're talking with someone who just does not understand, the typical, they give you that fluoride stare, they're on a different frequency. They're not meant to engage in this stuff at that time. They're not going to hear you, no matter how well-versed you are, no matter how, great you think you can explain it. They're not going to hear you. It's like when, who is it? Was it Charlie Brown that heard Lucy in the Peanuts, and it was just wah, 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 or the teacher?
That was all the adults sounded like.
Yeah. And that's what they sound like to you. So stop. You have to understand we're all on different frequencies, and some of us connect, some of us don't connect. And that's part of the reason why.
I used to really struggle with it because of my Christian background. I felt like, well, once you have the truth, you have to go and convert other people to it. So I'd run around telling people, hey, do you know that sacred structures do all this stuff? And people like, oh, that's, they'd shrug maybe and just kind of, go back to the ball game. But and I did the same thing with ayahuasca. When I got into that, I really wanted to, tell everybody about it. And I quickly realized that, like you're saying, so people are in different frequencies, and it's not arrogant to come to terms with that. I think it's actually important because
Matthew, you're living in your truth.
That's
right.
It.
And I'm living in my truth, and their truth is different. And that's what we have to understand. And the fact that we want to convert everyone to our truth is the problem. It's ego, and that's what it boils down to.
The egotistical move is to try to convert people. That's right.
Yep. And it's like, no, that's not the move. The move is if they want to learn, you teach. If not, move on. And there is someone out there that's willing to learn, and that's who you have to connect with.
Yeah. And it can even be dangerous to try to wake up a sleepwalker.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. You don't want to poke a zombie, let them be.
And, Matt, I didn't know we were going to be talking about this stuff, but if people are interested in ayahuasca, I'll just put this out there. There's this amazing book called The Fellowship of the River by Joe Tafur. This fellow is a real gem. He's a Colombian American. He's a trained medical doctor who went back to his roots and in Colombia, and began studying medicinal plants, with the tribes. And he does an amazing job of pulling together the science of modern medicine with traditional ways of healing. So yeah, the Fellowship of the River would just be an outstanding place for people to go.
Oh, that's excellent. I will put a link to that in the show notes for everyone that's interested. Yeah, I don't usually get into ayahuasca much on my show, so this is a first, and it's honestly, it's one of those things I've been interested in, but out here in New England, I don't think it's as prevalent as it is out west.
It's there. We'll talk offline.
Sounds
you can
good.
always come here, Matt. Come on out and visit, and I'll introduce you.
Oh boy, don't tempt me with a good time.
So, do we want to dive into the official formal presentation?
Dude, I would love to. I've been anxious since you told me you had a presentation. I'm a visual guy, so like I said, anybody that brings a presentation, it's already a win in my book, because I can learn that way. Now, anybody that's listening, if you want to watch this, it will be free on the Patreon. It will be on YouTube. Hopefully they don't kick it off, and then also on Spotify you can watch the video. So, and you're going to want to watch it. Matthew's going to bring 15 amazing slides here.
Well, let's do it. So I have to screen share, and we're just going to talk our way through this, Matt. Okay, I haven't honed my presentation skills, so we're just going to go through it a little at a time here. Now, you let me know if I've done this correctly, because you can see. Let's see. Here we go. You see my screen?
Jackpot.
Cool. All right. We are in.
By the way, this drawing is one of my favorite. This image here is one of my favorites.
So this, disclaimer here, I pulled images from the internets. This is not original artwork. There was too many images here to source. They're common images. I'm just, what I'm trying to do is connect dots. So I don't claim authorship over the artwork or the imagery in here. This cover image really is, I did do this collage, so I put my little handle on there. The idea of the cathedral being superimposed over the earth with its electromagnetic field surrounding the cathedral. And it's really, this was the crystallization really of the idea of what I was trying to get at, is that all living bodies have an electromagnetic field. Now, before anybody with real knowledge about electromagnetic principles jumps on this, I understand enough to get into trouble, whether I'm wiring my house or whether I'm talking about electromagnetic field theory. I understand that it's dielectric on one side and magnetism on the other, and that together you get electricity. That's my understanding of it. I'm a layman when it comes to this. These are all of my disclaimers going in, because I'm a little bit out of my league. So again, I'm just a generalist trying to connect some dots and put some ideas out there. So starting out with some quotes from our friend Albert Einstein. He says, "What we have called matter is energy. There is no matter." Now, so this is a very interesting quote, because Albert Einstein also denied the existence of the ether, which drove Nikola Tesla up a wall. So next quote: "Light is nothing but a sound wave in the ether." So that right there, it's just worth pausing on, and just kind of, it's its own meditation, because we understand light as particles that that go through empty space from point A to point B. But what this is saying is that there's no particle traveling. If we have an ether, if we have a medium, that light is a perturbation, it's a disturbance, an agitation of the etheric field. And that's what we'll get a little bit more into that as we go. Ken Wheeler, and I got a lot of my my understanding from Ken Wheeler, and he's on YouTube, and he's just an outstanding proponent of this way of looking at physics, ether physics. I would definitely, along with Thunderbolt's project, I would definitely encourage people to check out the work of Ken Wheeler.
Yeah, I definitely recommend Ken also. Ken is a smart guy.
Yeah. So he says, humorously, matter is hard light. And so then one from Walter Russell, God is life, God is light, God is all that is. So here again, God, consciousness, the greater mind is light, light is matter. We're all in it together, so to speak, right? So
it's layers, right? It all connects, but it's like a onion, right? You have to pull back the layers, but without it, it's nothing. And I'm with you. I love Einstein. Einstein seems to be like the Elon Musk of his time, because he was just like an agent of chaos.
Yeah, Ken Wheeler also says that he stole E = mc square from a French physicist named, and I'll butcher this, so maybe we can put a show note at the end to get this right, but Henri Juan Poiré, I think, and I probably just messed that up. But that wasn't even his original idea or breakthrough, that E = mc square. So, well, moving right along. So the idea that I'm trying to put forward is that old world architecture has an electrical essence. Now, we're familiar with these toroidal images, right? When we look at an apple, what have you, we look at the human body, we often see, when we look at the images of like the electro, I'm going to use electromagnetic field because it's easy and people are familiar with that, even though it might not be technically correct. So we see this sort of toroidal field around a living body, whether it be a human, tree, plant.
Yep. Why did they have us 6 feet apart? It was to separate our toroidal fields.
Yes.
The human, because the human body has a toroidal field that goes out 6 feet around it. And that's why, people, when you walk by someone, sometimes you don't even have to touch them. You get the goosebumps on the back of your neck, and that's your fields crossing. That's your energies crossing. And you're getting that vibe that maybe this isn't the right vibe I want to be in.
You're 100% right. And that shows how devious all of that really was. It was completely arbitrary, but it was also just straight up evil.
Yeah, it was just
to force children to socially distance. All of that was just so harmful.
And it shows, but it's relevant to this, right? Because we are energy. We are full of it. And plasma, right? You look at the sun. The sun is just a giant ball of plasma.
So and we're going to get into this. So tell me if you can see my mouse.
Yes.
Around. Yeah. Okay, good. Because just that you said that the sun is a ball of plasma. Now the idea of this is that plasma is scalable. Plasma phenomena is fully scalable from the macro to the micro. The same type of phenomena happens at all levels. It's self-similar and it's fractal. So you have at the galactic scale, galaxies have a toroidal electromagnetic field. And we won't get too much into dark matter and dark energy and all of the things that modern physics has had to conjure up to explain why, for instance, the stars on the outermost flank of a galaxy spin around at the same rate as the stars on the inside, because gravity can't explain that. Centripetal forces would have this thing fly apart. So they had to come up with, these phantom forces, such as dark matters pushing in on a galaxy to hold it together. The electric universe theory does not have that problem. So you have these toroidal fields around galaxies. You have it at the celestial scale around suns, and you have it at the planetary scale. So the Earth has its own electromagnetic field. Now, my understanding is that when we witness the aurora borealis, the northern lights, what we're seeing is where the electric field of the Earth is supercharged as it hits the Earth. So again, going back to this idea that the ancients in the olden times, the atmosphere was more highly electric charged, so more plasma phenomena was visible to our ancestors. And well, we'll get into that. So this again is from Ken Wheeler. This breakdown. So you have this 0 point. People talk about 0 point energy, right? How do we get perpetual and free energy? Well, the 0 point is where the torus folds in on itself and comes back out again. And so that's the dielectric point. The magnetic point, magnetism, is what happens out out here in the field. So and again, I just give all the credit to Ken Wheeler, and I consider myself a student of his. I'm really, as I go, I'm trying to understand this at a deeper level. I took my notes from one of his last podcasts, and I transposed them onto this presentation here. So I'm learning this as I'm actually doing the presentation. So the magnetism is the field outside of the 0 point dielectric. This is the toroid. The hyperboloid is what's in here. This is the hyperboloid, right? It's the hourglass on the inside. The anode is the magnetic field. The cathode is the dielectric 0 point. This can also be, the magnetic field can also be associated with heat, and the dielectric 0 point can be associated with cold. And he makes this, what I think is a really profound point, that it's the 0 point is light. That's the source. What we perceive as light is really illumination. And he makes that distinction. And it's really profound. And it's something that I'm just, sitting with and kind of taking on as a meditation. But the idea that what we perceive as light is really illumination, and that light itself it's the source, and it's the nothing versus the everything of the magnetic field. So when we experience reality, we're experiencing the magnetic field opening up.
Okay. So it'd be the presence and absence of light.
It's the everything and the nothing.
Okay. Wow. That's an interesting take on it. I can relate to that, though. It makes sense. And you look at it, and you think about how our realm is set up, right? I mean, we have magnetic energies all over the place. And they tell us it's a north and south pole, which is, interesting, but oh man, this is great.
Yeah. And the north and south pole, I find this curious too, because we think about it in these terms, but I think maybe I was listening to one of Randy's podcasts where somebody he was interviewing was talking about how the actual the north and south was actually inside and outside, that the polarity existed within and without.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a different way of looking at it. So again, and I invite anybody that listens to this and has something to contribute or can offer some clarity to these concepts, to please reach out.
Oh, I'd love it. Yeah.
Comments. We're just learning as we go here. So again, plants and trees are rooted in the electromagnetic field of the earth just by their being rooted. Yep. Right? A tree doesn't have trouble maintaining an electromagnetic field in alignment with the Earth's, because it's rooted in the Earth, and that's the source of its life, and it'll never move from that as long as it's living. And an apple grows on the tree, right? So it's going to have a perfectly intact electromagnetic field when it's picked. Here, this is a bone to the flat Earth community, because I just think this is a super cool graphic. It's showing the plane of the realm, with the tree moving through the center of the mountain and then cycling back in on itself. And so I love this graphic, although I'm not a proponent, for the same reason that I'm not a proponent of flat apples. But that's all I'll say about that.
No, I like this. That was really interesting there, because and again, that gets into the whole as above, so below concept too. Yes. Which is a whole nother level to this, but
that's exactly it. And the alchemical principles behind cathedrals are very important to understanding this.
Mm-hmm.
And incidentally, Jay Widener is a really good source for this, the alchemical concepts, and explaining maybe who built the cathedrals and why. He has some things to say about that. So human beings, on the other hand, we're not rooted, right? And we're seeking a connection with divinity. We're trying to find ways to align our light body with the divine, with the earth, but with the divine, with the source ultimately.
Well, that's why grounding is so significant, right? I mean, yep. I never believed in any of that. And honestly, for a good 35 years of my life, I would not take my shoes off. And it's like, I got brainwashed by the system to believe that, these are the best things ever for your feet. And then all of a sudden you start taking your shoes off and you start walking around and you're like, oh, wow, there's something too, that you feel that energy, you feel the connection come through you.
Yeah, the hippies, they were onto something with that one for sure. Going barefoot on the beach or in the grass.
Well, and that also leads you to think about, all the concrete that's out there, all the asphalt that's out there that inhibits that, and the rubber on your shoes. And I think of all the rubber that's out there to inhibit connection and prohibit connection. So
yeah, and so you wonder why there's so much dis-ease. It's just like everywhere you turn, we're disconnected from the source. Yes. And so this is what we're after, right? And I think, this search of old world architecture, I think in a lot of ways is this yearning that we have, and it's a nostalgia for something that, was just there just yesterday. It was still somewhat intact, or mostly intact even, not too long ago. And so we've been ripped out of that more sort of natural, and I like to call it the analog world.
Yes. And that's been my draw to this. My draw to the old world is, the buildings are amazing, but it's that health side of it, right? That connection, that the positive frequencies, the connection with nature that we've lost. And, and that's what I'm searching for, is to find out, how do we get humanity healthy again, on the right path? Maybe not, it's not going to be through their system. It's going to have to be outside the system. But how do we get back to that old way where there were, connections? We were in tune with our realm, whereas today we couldn't be more disconnected.
Yeah. And so what role can architecture play in this? Because there's a lot of different approaches. People use tuning forks. They use, what we talked about, entheogens, that, meditation, just walking, hiking, there's lots of different ways of getting back to it, but architecture plays an important role. So looking at the examples of the old world and what it was that they were doing can help us get to better tomorrows, I think.
Oh, I'm with you on that. Absolutely.
So this idea here is that a magnet is an inside out AC generator, or you can say an AC generator is an inside out magnet. And that again is from Ken Wheeler. And Ken Wheeler, he's very versed in the work of Tesla, and all of the the physicists of that day, Heaviside and others that understood the existence of the ether. And if you think about, he talks about how an AC generator is not producing energy; it's channeling it. And again, here it's like the limit of my own understanding and knowledge. So I'll let people kind of like ponder on this idea. But when I heard Ken talk about magnets being an inside out AC generator and vice versa, it's kind of like the light bulb went off, like figuratively and literally. It's like, oh, so magnets, by being magnets, they have an electromagnetic field that is aligned with 0 point of a greater electromagnetic field.
The receptors, right?
Yeah, as a way of looking at it, they're drawing energy directly from the ether without combustion. There's no burning of fossil fuels needed. And so this diagram here kind of shows, how different forms of magnets can, you can manipulate the field with how you orient the magnets and the poles to one another. And it's just a simple experiment of taking a magnet and wrapping copper wire around it proves that electricity and magnetism are two sides of a coin. Where you have electricity, you have magnetism, and where you have magnetism, you have electricity.
Yeah, and I have multiple examples of this that I've downloaded over time of people just creating electricity off of magnets.
Mm-hmm.
Magnets and a little bit of wire, and boom, there you go. And another guy to check out, who's has a really fun YouTube channel, is Parker Edmondson.
He's the best.
He's just one of my favorites. He wants to live in the 1800s. I want to meet that guy someday, because he's in the process of trying to get an old house, and he wants to renovate it to the period and try and get it running on free energy. And that would just be the coolest thing, man.
Yeah, that'd be the cat's meow right there. It'd be great to see if he could figure out the radiant fireplace mechanics.
Yes, that's one of the things I'm interested in, is that those radium fireplaces, because you look at these old places with these just massive fireplaces, but there's no chimney.
Right.
It's like, whoa, well, where's the smoke go?
Not only is there no chimney, there's precious artwork hanging over the mantle.
Yes.
Which you wouldn't really want to do if you were burning logs down there.
Yeah, no, they tend to give off soot and dirt and smoke. They just, it's not good for fine art.
So just right there, like you can picture it. If you have, a fractal antenna going up into the atmosphere, and you have grounding, right? Stone, iron, grounding, and you're creating a circuit, and then you perturb the field with the elements of what do they call those stanchions that sit out front of those old fireplaces. There's a name for that. They're kind of like sometimes shaped like gargoyles, but they're those metal. They say that you put logs on them.
The pair of I forgot what they're called.
But I think that what they were doing there is creating this cathode anode electrical connectivity and producing heat.
Yep.
Through that. And once you start getting your head around some of these concepts, it's not that far out.
Not at
Right?
all. But people don't want to grasp the concept because they've been indoctrinated well in this school system to believe that this is nonsense. Come on, guys.
Well, yeah, it gets dismissed out of hand, especially by academia and all the smart people, right? The experts. Sometimes it feels like the Sisyphus syndrome, accepting that, the hill of beans that modern scientism is built upon is quickly eroding. So I think that this is what's going to be emerging as that continues to fall apart. So now we looked at bricks, right? And this is straight from that Scientific American article where they're able to manipulate just this simple clinker brick in such a way as to enable it to hold charge. So here again, okay, our building's electric. Now this gets a little bit more into the electric universe idea, and so there's this idea that within modern science that stars, and our sun in particular, are nuclear furnaces, right? And it's all held together by gravity, and it's churning out however many trillions of tons of hydrogen atoms. And what the electric universe theory says is that's kind of a load of bunk. That stars are not nuclear furnaces. They're not, the heat is not being generated from within the star. And what they'll do is they'll point to the corona of the stars, and in our sun in particular, being many, many, many times hotter than the core.
Yep.
And so if the sun was a nuclear furnace, how come the hottest part isn't in the center? How come the hottest part is way out in the corona? And by far the hottest. And so what the electric universe proponents suggest is that stars are formed along pinch points of what are called Birkeland currents. Birkeland currents were named for a physicist of the late 1800s, I believe, named Christian Birkeland. And he did actual plasma experiments showing this stuff. And so that throughout the vastness of space, there are pairs of plasma filaments, again called Birkeland currents, that when they wrap around one another, they intensify, and so then you get stars along these pairs of filaments, and they refer to them as pearls on a string. The filaments being the string. And Walt Thornhill, he's sort of like the godfather of the Thunderbolts project, and he explains this eloquently. So I'd recommend people go and check out the work of Walt Thornhill.
Yeah, Matthew, and for anybody listening, I love the diagram that you have here at the bottom where it has, the two stars, and then it shows them basically as they're getting closer, and then almost as they link, right? And then they start spinning in almost it looks like a counterclockwise fashion until at the end, initially they start with two dots, so to speak. And then by the end of it, you've had them twist and merge into almost a yin yang sign.
Now, what those two dots are, what those are actual cross sections of these plasma filaments. So you can see it in the visual here, where you have, if you took a cross section here, you'd get this sort of owl-like form, right?
Yep.
And then as the filaments begin to twist around each other, you get this yin and yang twisting, swirling, like hurricane-like pattern.
And what's interesting about the magnetic one is it's almost like a bullseye, right? I mean, you have layers of circles, where in the plasma side, it's totally like you were saying, it's a swirl, a yin yang pattern. It's a different perspective of it.
Yeah. And so if we can imagine for a moment that stars are powered from without by these circuits, by these plasma filaments called Birkeland currents, well, then it's kind of a game changer, because we go back to the images from earlier, where you have galaxies charging stars, charging planets, charging us.
Yep.
Right? You can see the self-similarity and the fractal nature of this.
Oh.
And so here's some further experimentation where, and maybe you've seen these ferrocell experiments, where they'll take just 2 sheets of glass and they'll put a ferrofluid, which is just like a super thin, highly viscous fluid, in the middle, and shine a light through. And then when you add a magnet to it, what emerges is really the conjugate nature of the universe. You see, without having to take mushrooms, you can see the nature of the geometry of the ether.
Yeah, I mean, that looks like the flower of life almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
And again, when you look at this, okay, so that's, whoops, got ahead of myself. This is a plasma formation. And so you can see again these owl eyes here again, with this simple charge running through a copper wire in the iron filings, creating this owl-like field pattern. And then when you look at petroglyphs, and this is another case that they make, is that petroglyphs are a record of plasma formations that were witnessed all over the earth, which could help explain why the motifs of petroglyphs are so similar no matter where you go. And I believe it was Anthony Peratt, I hope I got that right, that actually went and actually studied in situ petroglyphs and documented, showed that they face the same direction with, over great distances.
Really?
They'll have this similar carvings very far apart from each other, miles, hundreds of miles apart, but facing the same direction, which seems to suggest that they were recording something that they were seeing in the sky. And you see different ones, like Jacob's Ladder is another plasma formation. This is why I'm wearing this t-shirt. You see this, the stick man.
Yep.
And this image here is actually a plasma generated image in a laboratory.
Really?
Yeah. And it's how the stick man is represented in rock art all over the world.
Yep. Wow, this owl thing has got my head spinning now, because there's so much symbolism in the owl and so much use of owl symbolism in all over the place, that wow.
And for those who really want to go there, here is a
Yeah, crop circle.
here's a crop circle of the owl eyes, and who's trying to tell us something.
It's like the owl eyes in the sun.
Right. I mean, look at this. It's like a pine cone or a sunflower pattern.
Yep.
Now, why would a pine cone or a sunflower grow the way it does? Because this is the nature of the geometry of the ether that is it's forming out of.
And that shape right there is, when I was looking down at the grass, that's what I would see, was just those perfect sacred patterns just repeated over and over. And it's just so amazing to see here and tie it in together, that but you see it everywhere. It's in all creation.
And just this crop circle. It's like you have the owl eyes and you have this pattern superimposed on one on each other.
Exactly. Yep. Wow. Now, what's the upper right picture with the fingers and the two circles?
So this is how you derive these or generate these geometric patterns with the ferrocell experiment. Is you just apply a magnet to it.
Right over it. Okay, that's the magnet. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, I see it
And
now.
so this one here where you get the owl eyes, that magnet would have been just turned on its side. So it's on the plate like this. The plate is here,
Yep.
and you're getting the toroidal
Mm-hmm.
that way.
It's the yin and the yang. Yep.
Yeah.
The two sides of the energy field. Wow. That's so
And
cool.
this is cool. This is really cool because back to my visit to the museum, the local museum in Ellensburg, I saw this pattern on the wall in a picture, and they've actually got actual petroglyphs in there that were taken from the Columbia River Gorge. So this image here actually came from right around me in the Columbia River Gorge.
Oh, that's so cool. Isn't it amazing when you find it locally? You know, you
That's the
get into
best.
the, oh,
Yeah, because you realize you're connected to all of this directly, and it's all around us, hidden in plain sight.
yeah, that's the thing. But many are blind to it and can't see it. And that's the problem. That's why I do this, is to try and let people see it. And hopefully we open a couple eyes.
Owl eyes and other. So this is my ode to Walter Russell and his amazing book, Universal One. Matt, are you familiar with this book?
I haven't read it. I know who Walter Russell is, though.
I highly recommend it. I mean, I put this up here just to demonstrate that this is, I believe that this is what he was driving at. You know, that you gravitation doesn't explain the structure of the universe, but with gravitation you need radiation, you need the yin and the yang, inhalation and exhalation, right?
Yep.
Curving in and curving out, positive and negative charge. So that's what we're after here, male
I
and
don't
female.
know, that cosmic pendulum, it kind of looks like the pedophile sign, you know, all those Q people are going to be triggered.
Well, I still hold to the idea that there is a female polarity and a male polarity, and I don't think it's controversial to suggest that humans aren't exempt from the laws of nature.
No, I mean, anyone that thinks they are is in for a rude awakening, you know?
Well, yeah, that's a whole nother rabbit hole. And my heart goes out to people that are really struggling with this, because and especially the youth. I think they've got the kids, young people in general, just so twisted up about this. And it leads to a lot of internal turmoil and doubt and confusion.
Yeah, and
And
that's one of the reasons, Matthew, why I love talking about the buildings with my son. You know, I love showing him the old buildings, and he's kind of getting into it, you know, like he likes to see. In the beginning he was just like, "Oh, Dad, another building." And now he's like, "Oh, that one looks kind of like the one you showed me before," or "Look at the windows on that one," and things like that, cuz he likes the stained glass windows in the cathedrals. He just thinks they're unbelievable.
yeah, it's great to share this with kids because their eyes light up.
Yep.
Yeah. I took my middle son Mateo to see Graham Hancock when he spoke here in Seattle about 3 years ago. He was putting out his book America Before.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it wasn't even that. Maybe it was like 2 years ago. But yeah, just we've been talking about the pyramids for years now.
That's one of our favorites
kids are drawn
too.
to this.
Yeah, and the pyramids are a good one because that's one where they can kind of see the mysticism in it, the, if you want to say, fantasy side of it, you know, because there's been so much fantasy around Egypt and the tombs, like the pyramids, so to speak, that you know, they can use that. And then if you can get them thinking with that side of the brain, that creative side, then you can start bringing them into, okay, well, they did it in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they did it any other time in history? And
Right.
then you start seeing the wheel turn that, okay, yeah, maybe it is possible.
Yeah, and if you listen to like what Randall Carlson says, he's kind of Graham Hancock's right hand man there, and he explains how the pyramids, the Great Pyramid in particular, is a scale model of the Earth.
Yep.
And I think that really, and I had to hit the pause button when I heard that, because that means a lot of things. It means that they knew how big the Earth is way back when, in order for it to be a scale model of the Earth, and it's also at the scale of 43,200. So you have that sacred number
432
embedded in
yep.
it.
Yeah, but it's just a coincidence, Matthew. Come on.
Well, that's what the experts
you know, I love those people. It's just a coincidence. Come on.
That's what the experts say.
Yeah.
So
yeah, our buddy, what is his name? Faraz Hawad or whatever. That guy is the biggest criminal out there. He's the Fauci of Egypt.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he's a gatekeeper. So, so they're out there. So we're going to do our little end run around it and do our own thing over here while they flail. And I'll also, with radiation, this again is as above, so below, as within, so without.
I like that. I like that as much, that as within, as without. It makes more sense.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And so just a quick counterpoint here, modern scientism denies the ether, confines electricity to wires fed by combustion, and claims the sun is a dangerous sort of disease.
Yeah.
And I ain't buying it. It's lies and deception. And, what we're dealing with now with, dare I say, 5G, we've got towers all around us, and they're rolling this stuff out real fast. It was clever how they put all these 5G towers up when we were locked down, because of, what, I want this to stay up on YouTube, but, I won't lie. I feel like sometimes I can feel it. I feel like I've been telling my wife, I think they turned it up a notch today because I'm just out of sorts.
Matthew, I swear, when I was living in the apartment, I have never been that inundated and bombarded with frequency in my life. Like it was just overwhelming to the point where I was getting headaches from it. It was, altering my mood. And then as soon as I got out of there and I got out here up on the mountain, it's like a whole new world. I mean, I'm on a quartz mountain up here, and
oh wow,
there's like, you can't get Wi-Fi up here. Everything's blocked. It's great. I mean, from that standpoint, that I walk my dog up the rest of the mountain every morning, and I get about 100 yards outside my door, and I have no cell service, no Wi-Fi service. It's a beautiful thing up here. And I'm with you. I feel like it is definitely something to it. And you can feel it when they start tweaking it a little bit. I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's the opposite of where we're trying to go. But that's what we're up against.
Well, it's like what you talked about with your son's school being a Faraday cage.
Yes. Yeah.
And just blocking everything metal, out.
Stud.
Yep.
Steel beams, clad in metal,
unnatural.
Yeah, and stuffed full of Wi-Fi, and they wonder why kids get sick.
Yep. Well,
so sacred buildings are aligned and attuned to the human form. So I love this image. Again, not my artwork. This is attributed to DW down here. Hats off to you. It's a great collage showing different sacred structures and temples, and how just in plan they align with the human body
and sacred geometry
in all our proportions.
Yes. It's amazing. And notice, where are the centers of these cathedrals? Right in the green, right in the heart.
Right.
And that's where all the people would be.
Yes.
Right. And then if you look where the purples are in most churches, I would imagine that's where the organ would be.
Oh, interesting.
Right. You're going to get the frequencies coming from the crown, basically.
Oh, and look at where the entrance is. It's like the womb.
Sacral. Yep.
Isn't that fascinating?
I'm with you. This is a great slide right here. This really lays it out and makes you see that there is more to these cathedrals than just, a stone building. There
And
is.
look at where they have the choir is in the throat chakra.
Yep. The voice.
You can't make this up.
That is, wow. I've never, and I just before, when we were talking and I was scrolling through, because I have pictures like this that shows the sacred geometric patterns in the different, and it had the human body, and I never even put the chakras together with the cathedral, because that's amazing. From entering in the womb area, going up through the stomach. Wow. So you're climbing the chakras as you get closer to the organs. Wow. That's beautiful. I love it. And the Solomon's Temple one is really interesting too, with the outbuilding by his feet.
Right. Interesting too. Yeah.
Great slide. Oh, I love that one.
So then we were talking about alchemy, and so this excuse me, this image over here on the right is from a book that was actually recommended by Jay Widener, which I picked up. It was the most expensive book I ever bought, but I'm so glad I did. Called Natural Architecture, and they get into the alchemy of the sacred geometry of the cathedrals, and and apparently the author is like not fully understood if this was the author. It was written in French, it was saved as a manuscript and passed down and somehow preserved, and then it was translated into English. But what I love about this image on the right there is that it shows the two pillars of the alchemical, as above so below. The alchemist holding the model of the cathedral and examining it as a sacred work.
Yeah, that's a great. I'm just trying to look at all the intricate details. It's just such a detailed drawing too. And there's, the little flags up above. You've got the stars. It looks like pine cones. I don't know what the first flag is, but then you get into you've got the masonry
Acorns.
tools.
They look like acorns.
Yeah. So it's almost.
None of this stuff is by accident, and it's all so intentional. And that's what this tells me. Every piece of it is considered as a part of the whole. And again, this self-similar fractal replication of each part relating back to the whole in this really highly charged, resonant, harmonic whole. There's a book out there called Pillars of the Earth. It's a novel. What's the guy's name? I have it on my shelf back here. Can't remember the author's name right now. Ken Follett, I believe. And he makes a big fuss in the preface about how he spent, I don't know, 10 or 20 years traveling around to cathedrals and studying cathedrals, and he really wanted to write a novel about that was based on the story of how a cathedral was built. And it's really good storytelling, but how he describes the actual building of the cathedral was this really kind of cartoonish, like trial and error. Like, well, they tried this, it didn't work, so they did something else. Well, his daughter was sitting in the structure after the shell was up, and she looked up and said, "Dad, wouldn't a window look really great there?" And her name was Rose, so now we call them Rose Windows. And it was just like, come on,
That's it.
I've come to the point where I think cathedrals, they're, first of all, they're divinely inspired. Second of all, we have no idea what we're looking at. That's how I feel. Like whenever you see, drawings, you never see like actual construction drawings. Like how the hell did these things go together? How do you build a foundation and start erecting columns out of, I don't know, pink granite and marble that are going to hold up this crystalline edifice that's, hundreds of feet into the air with all of its flying buttresses, like the advanced, highly advanced engineering and architecture that goes into this, together with all of these alchemical principles and sacred geometry. It's so mind-boggling. And I really do believe that, we talk about like levels of consciousness. We're here. We're sort of like, we might be like 2 or 3 steps up from being NPC, but we got a long way to go. Like I think that these structures were built by people with
they're master craftsmen.
higher consciousness.
Yeah,
I think they had a higher consciousness.
I agree. I think they were at a higher frequency. They were in tune with something that we've lost connection to. And I I've been listening a lot, and I sound like a broken record to the people that listen to the show, but the guys over at Operation Red Pill have been talking about the trivium and the quadrivium.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I really, the more I listen to that and the more I start thinking about it and the way they've taken geometry out of education and pushing away from music and things like that, and the arts, it's a perversion. And right. I really feel like that. Yeah, there you go.
Highly recommended.
So anyone that's, it's one of those where we have to try and find a way. And that's, again, what I was talking about before. My mission in this with the old buildings is to find that connection, right? Find out how they did it, or why they did it the way they did to benefit humanity. And at what point was it that they decided, okay, now we're not going to do this anymore?
Yeah. Yes. And I think that we have some ideas.
And we're close. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like when they destroyed the old world.
Yep.
And
our modern grid. I don't know if you follow her on Instagram, but the Tartarian Talisman, she has a great little Instagram page. And she was talking about it today, about, the destruction of the old world, and why and when do you see them so fervently trying to demolish something and so quickly wipe it away, right? And we were passing DMs back and forth because I thought this was just a great idea and concept, because when I was thinking about the Chicago fire, before the ground, the ash, the embers were still hot, they started building right away. There was no worry about what caused the fire. It was, no, we got to start rebuilding. And it's like, that just doesn't sit with me right, because there should have been time taken and consideration taken into these buildings and not just throw up anything, any structure.
Well, right. Well, one thing I came across in researching the World Fairs is that the fair builders, the fair developers were contracted to demolish all of the buildings that were within each of the fair grounds after the fair was over.
Yep.
They were actually obligated contractually to destroy it.
Yeah, because I know in my Chicago research, they debated how they wanted it to go out, because they said it has to go out with the same bang that it came in with, and it's like God, guys.
Yes, to seal it in our consciousness, and then replace it with Disneyland and Walt Disney animations that kind of fill that void in our consciousness and make it seem like it was all a dream.
Yep. Or a fairy tale, right?
Yeah. So, what we have in cathedrals are self-similar fractal patterns found throughout all sacred structures, really. But I think best exemplified in these cathedrals. And here's some examples of Exeter, Gloucester, Bath, and Reims.
And you know,
And
what's
again,
funny too, Matthew, is that, here, all these pictures are European, right? And when people think about these structures, they're like, oh yeah, those are European structures. Well, then you go over to India, you see similar structures over there. You go to China, you go to South America, you go to Africa, and you start seeing similar structures all over the world. And it's not just in Europe, like we're led to believe.
I've got some images coming up of St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, and it's just like this. I
and I've been in St. Patrick's, and man, is that a beautiful cathedral. Oof. Yeah, I wish I went in it with the eyes I have now, though.
Exactly. Yeah. Speaking of that, I studied architecture in Newark, New Jersey, and it was a stone's throw. My architecture school. It was a stone's throw from, I believe it's Sacred Heart Cathedral, and in Newark, you can look that up. It's breathtaking.
Yep.
And I just, I still had the blinders on. I didn't appreciate what was right there. Like I really do want to go back and just spend some time, because it's world-class architecture.
Yeah.
And I didn't go in it once. And I'm embarrassed to say that. Because I was still into like the Bauhaus and like Corbusier and modern architecture. I thought that was cool. Little did I know.
Well, field trip.
Yes. So, and just as in nature, self-similar fractal patterns are found throughout.
Oh, this is great. Yeah, my
so if
friend,
you hold these side by side, a picture starts to emerge of, these cathedrals are built with natural order, natural law, and a natural exquisite beauty of just the logos that comes with adhering to nature's principles. Right. So we have Lichtenberg currents, which shown in the middle here is this wood engraving technique of attaching two electric cables to a block of wood that's wet with water and running a current, and then it creates fractal Lichtenberg figures that look just like canyons at the macro scale, and then they make these beautiful sculptural pieces. And again, thinking about the fact that plasma phenomena is fully scalable from the macro to the micro. So you have crystals that self-replicate, and there's self-similar fractal patterns in these crystals. The Mandelbrot set. Everybody's probably sat there with a video running of Mandelbrot set, getting dizzy, but seeing these patterns repeat over and over and over again. It's just a very simple equation that derives it at this infinite variation. Fern leaves, ice crystals.
It just goes on. And these, I mean, this Lichtenberg pattern really gets me, man, because you see it, and when you're in the electric universe, you start listening to people, and I know Ari Asulin really pushes it, that you look at the Grand Canyon and it's essentially just a Lichtenberg pattern. It's fried. Yeah. And anyone that wants to see more pictures of this, on Instagram, Terrillion had just put, I think, probably 20 pictures out there of the Lichtenberg. So you want to see it.
You can just hover over the Southwest on Google Maps and zoom in and out, and you're just going to come across one Lichtenberg pattern after another. And it does look like that whole region has been fried.
And it's basically the Rockies West, that whole area up and down the Rockies and around the Grand Canyon, and you go down into New Mexico and Arizona. It's all. Yeah. And and what else do you see out there? It's all red.
Huh.
right? All the land is oxidized. It's just, it's red. It's almost like it's been burnt.
Like Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Valles Marineris on Mars, it's the scar across the face of Mars, is a ginormous, is many times the size of the Grand Canyon. And if you really look at it, it looks like a plasma thunderbolt just raked itself across the surface of Mars.
Yep.
And if you really, when you get into that, it's fun because, you know, modern planetary astrophysicists would say that they would say that that was as a result of water erosion that once, you know, when the Mars once had water. Well, I'm not denying that Mars once had water, but that canyon system, fractal canyon system, doesn't have outlets. Like the branches of the canyons just they create these Lichtenberg branches and they just end. And they're not, there's no outlets where the water would have gone. They would have, the water would just kind of fill up.
It would have pooled, right?
It would have pooled.
Yeah.
So it suggests that maybe it's not from water erosion, and perhaps again it goes back to the myths of the ancestors and the idea of the thunderbolts of the gods.
And it's interesting because that the image on the bottom left here of the what is that? That's
Now you stumped me.
yeah, no. I just watched a video of the guy making it the other day, where he took a bunch of things and he heated it up and put it together, and it's, I can't remember what it's called, but it's wild. And my son actually has a crystal like that too. It's really cool.
So I'm showing these images to you know, again, just to really emphasize this idea that these sacred buildings are following natural patterns.
Yep.
Right. And here we have from the outside the stone and metallic spires and fractal antennas found throughout sacred structures, pulling down that etheric energy.
Spires. Yep. Oh man. And then I also notice on a lot of these is that they always have, you know, it's not stained glass, but that large window in the front that has a ornate geometric pattern in it. You know, the circle, which would, you know, on some modern, they would put like a clock in there or something, you know.
You mean Rose's window?
Yeah, Rose's window in the middle. It's like, it's just, it's amazing. And so you think about it now, why would they put that there? It's not for decoration, right? I mean, it has to have a function. These buildings are functional. They're not, you know, just a plan that they put together. These are living, breathing structures.
Yeah. So if what I'm saying is true, that these structures are hyper focusing these electromagnetic currents, let's say, right? Placing it in, and you have on the inside, you have this sort of fractal crystalline structure made of conductive materials, by the way, right?
Yep. Heavily conductive,
and then you have
by the way.
What's that?
Heavily conductive, by the way.
Heavily conductive materials, piezoelectric properties. You have the pipe organ, like we've discussed, right? In the head chakra.
Yep.
Pumping this vibration through this crystalline structure. Well, that rose window placed where it is going to act as an amplifier.
Yes.
Sending all of that good juju out into your community. And so here, again, Tesla proved that electricity can be generated by connecting heaven and earth and transmitting said electrical energy over great distances wirelessly. So the question that we keep bumping up against is this old world technology.
That is the $1 million question, isn't it? Right? I mean, because you look at it and it's not, though, when we look back, because looking at these old pictures and hearing about it, it's been around, it's been known. And Tesla wasn't the originator of it, right? I mean, Tesla got his work from others.
That's what I understand. Not to take
So
anything away from him, but
no,
did he come up with all of these ideas, or did he comprehend all of these ideas? And and again, we discussed last time how all the patent offices, United States patent office, is burned down twice
twice, not
in the
once,
1800s.
twice.
So who designed what and who was lost twice over in the 1800s. So yeah, give it to Tesla or what
Yeah.
have you.
Well, and we see that pattern over and over again, right? They have a character, so to speak, that they assign all of these roles to.
Yeah.
And it repeats throughout history.
Same with the architects. I would love to do a podcast with you where we just talk about the made up architects. And we
I
just
would.
go around and
I've been
identify
looking into
architects who
like
are attributed.
Burnham and Root from
Yes.
Chicago, because those guys just built everything.
Yes.
Every park in America, every building. They built thousands of buildings.
Well,
It's like
Olmsted gets every park, and he was
that's
a
it, Olmsted. Yep.
journalist.
Yeah, and that's what. Well, Burnham wasn't even an architect. Like, and then all of a sudden he's credited with building a mansion for like the richest guy in Chicago, and then marries his daughter.
And we talked about how Paxton was he's attributed to all the Crystal Palaces, and he was the gardener.
He's gardener. Yeah. Yeah. But he designed in what, 2 weeks?
Right. The London Crystal Palace.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he designed it in 2 weeks and they built it in 8 months.
So we think that they knew how to channel etheric energy. That's what we think.
Well, and that's interesting too, because I've seen and I've heard people talk about that there were cell phones back in the day.
Yeah, I've seen the pictures of the two women next to the fire hydrant, and they were connecting that coil.
Yeah.
Yeah, back in 1900 or so.
Yeah. So, I mean, who's to say that this isn't just a found technology? And I think that's what all this is. I think, in this realm that we're in, everything's been created already. We're just recreating it.
Yeah, I think we're in a process of rediscovery.
Yep.
I put this picture of the Fresnel lens up here because these are just mind bending. They're sculptures. They're just this like wizardry of engineering. They're marvels. I was in Lisbon, Portugal for my brother's wedding a few years ago, and they have a Fresnel lens museum right there in Lisbon, and I spent a few hours in there and just blew my mind.
Now, what's the story behind the lens? Because it's been a mystery to me.
Yeah, well, there again, it's like one of those things that are supposed to have been invented. I can't remember exactly. I'd have to look it up sometime in the 1800s. But it's just the ability of a Fresnel lens to throw light over great distances. I think that takes a profound understanding of the nature of light, and not seeing it as, again, like modern science looks at light as particles, going from point A to point B through empty space, as opposed to what the plasma physics point to, that light is a perturbation of the ether.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And there is a point source, and again, going back to the idea of the 0 point, but that light as we perceive it is really illumination. And the source of light.
It seems like that. I mean, that is like one of those concepts that you'd almost see it like the Colossus of Rhodes, one of these massive lighthouses. And when you think about it and you hear about the old lighthouses, there's talk of red mercury being involved and things like that would help with some of these processes and some of this illumination and such. But yeah, it's another one that's a mystery to me, because I don't see all these lighthouses just strictly being a beacon of light for approaching ships.
Well, not only that, like the actual lighthouses themselves, there's I have to find the pictures that I took of a lighthouse out in Fort so and so on the Olympic Peninsula up near Port Townsend. I just went on a little side trip, wasn't expecting to come across old world architecture, but I saw this, I mean, it looked like this lighthouse was built with megalithic blocks that were just finely carved and just like perfectly laid into place. And this is a relatively remote location out on the peninsula, and pretty rough weather conditions and all. And and again, it begs the question, like, who really did build this and when?
Yeah. When is the key, like, because that's where the mystery is, and all these, all those big stones. Who quarried the stones? Where'd they come from?
Yeah.
Those are all the questions that you're probably not going to get answers to.
Yeah.
And that's the part that's frustrating, because if we had the answers, we can reverse engineer, we can go back to the source and start checking it out. But with no information, or the narrative that they give you where they just attribute it to, John Smith, who also invented A, B, and C, we're, a dog chasing its tail, because you're in that never-ending loop that you're not going to get to the bottom of it.
And here's the thing that gets me mad is, let's say we're just batshit crazy, right?
Quite possible.
We're we're bored. We've done too many mushrooms, whatever. We're just like off on this crazy tangent. And all of these buildings that to us look like old world structures all across this country, much of which was burned down or torn down deliberately, that has all of these exquisite properties that we can't do anymore and all this kind of stuff. If it's true that all of it was built as they say it was, then this nation had a renaissance of breathtaking proportions that lasted for about 20, maybe 30 years.
Yep.
Where we built the most extraordinary structures all over the place in the most remote locations without, barely the infrastructure there to get, just to get from point A to point B. And with the most rudimentary tools.
Yep.
While people were trying to figure out how to just eat, scratch a living out of the soil.
If anybody's wondering about this, go check out old Utah. That's a mind-blowing idea. All those Mormon.
Salt Lake City.
Yep.
And so if we're completely off the rails, and the the Wikipedia narrative is true, or the narrative as distilled through Wikipedia, then what happened? What happened to this Renaissance? That should be like our great grandfathers, and that built all this stuff, and we should be celebrating this. It should be in all of our stories. It should be in all of our movies. It should be in all of our literature and all of our the legends and myths of our time. We should be intimately familiar with this stuff. So where did everybody go? Where'd all the stories go? Where'd all the knowledge go?
Instead, who do we get? We get J.P. Morgan. We get the Rockefellers. We get these people, Carnegie's. These are the characters that they feed us.
Yes.
As to the, responsible for all of this.
and worse yet, they label it Gilded Age and get us to hate it and look at it with disdain, which is what happened to me as an architecture student. I would look at this stuff, and now I think back, if I had this kind of like tug of war going on inside of myself, I'd look at it and be like, damn, that's really beautiful, and be like, oh, but it's the capitalists.
Yep.
It's bad. And so what if they tear it down? Right?
Yeah, there's such a dichotomy to that, that you're like, oh, on one side, fuck the capitalists, but at the other hand, it's like, maybe did they even build this? Or are they just claiming it?
Yeah.
Did they found it?
And it's much more interesting to look at it as old world, as part of another iteration of whatever civilization was here before it was seized upon.
Yeah, and I tend to lean on, if things were reset, right, you're going to build on what was previously there, or
Yeah.
use what was previously there first, and
Hmm.
then adapt it to what you know.
Hmm.
And that's, for people just to completely blow off the idea that there have been resets over time, and that, things have been manipulated over time, and that there have been essentially, you know, the slate's been blanked in certain areas, and you can rebuild. And we've seen
Hmm.
that throughout the 1800s with the fires. And that's recent history. We're not even going back into ancient history. We're just staying in the modern times, and you see it. Now, magnify that or multiply that for thousands and thousands of years. How many times could it have happened? How many resets have we been involved in? And we
Right.
just really don't know.
Right. And Plato talked about civilization being cyclical. We are trained to think that it's linear and that we're the cat's meow and the latest and greatest, and everything was leading up to, our iPhone in our pocket. Um and I understand it's, for many, and even for myself in the beginning, it seemed a bridge too far to think, well, all the textbooks are wrong. And all right, fuck the textbooks, because whatever about school, but all the literature is wrong, and the basically the historical record, and why, how could there be such a sense of like a collective amnesia that there's just no recollection of it? Well, then you get into these palatial orphanages and insane asylums all across the landscape, these remote locations where there's sprawling palaces with exquisite architecture that are stuffed full of crazy people. Where do all the crazy people come from? And
Yep.
then you get into the orphan trains, that were redistributing children across the landscape to any farmer that would take them. And what was going on there? And the
And
baby
incubator babies, right?
incubator babies at world fairs. um, it gets strange. It gets in it, as we discussed a little bit last time, it can be a little dark and it's unsettling, and sometimes you just have to take it in digestible bites.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because if you present the whole story as, we start seeing it unravel, that's when you get, oh, you're just crazy. That's just totally insane. But when you start piecing together asylums and orphanages and world fairs where these folks would learn the ways that they're going to have to live going forward, it doesn't seem so crazy. And that when you start talking or looking at firsthand accounts of people at the fairs and saying that, yeah, they walked around like they were under a spell.
Right.
Well, that's because they probably have no clue where they are or what they're doing here.
That's because they're under a spell.
Yeah. So they're
Yeah.
so disoriented that, you've just taken, it's like taking us and dropping us in the middle of the desert or the rainforest and
Yeah.
saying, yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, you're looking around like, oh shit, what do I do? Like, I don't know what's poisonous, what's not. I don't know what's going to kill me, what's not. Yeah. I don't know
Yeah.
what's going on here. It's
We're
going to
all
take you a
we're all
while.
under a spell. We're,
Yep.
we're all completely under a spell. And not only that, it's like, how do you tell somebody that's like maybe living in the suburbs that, hey, do you know that there was like a star fort here before? It's like, well, it's not here now. I
Yeah.
got shit to do.
Yep.
You know. Oh, that reminds me. After this, we get through this presentation, I do want to show you pictures, if we can find pictures of old Newark, because that city is really, it's near and dear to my heart. I spent a lot of time there. I grew up there. I studied architecture there. I grew up outside of it, but I lived for a bunch of years in Newark as an architecture student. Again, I had no idea. The old world buildings at Broad and Market that were torn down a few decades ago are mind bending. They're so beautiful and exquisite. And I had no idea. I had no idea that they were there. So I want to share those with you after we get
I'd
through.
love to see him.
Okay. So speaking of Rose's windows, they're masterpieces of cymatic design identified with cathedrals all around the world. And again, my contention is that these lovely devices are devices, and and they're acting as amplifiers for all of that energy that is being, gathered and channeled by the cathedral itself. And I put this image here because this idea has been floating around, hearkening back to Ewar's videos of the magnetron, or showing the magnetron, and how just by the geometry of this device, and in this case a spinning cathode at the center of it. Remember, we talked about the cathode and the anode. Well, when this spins, and this is still just by the way of this self-similar fractal geometry going around the inside of the circle, it generates charge. This is generating charge. These exist inside of every microwave.
Yep.
Right. And so it's just fascinating. And this is why I reject Ewar's rejection of his own work in total, because he was onto something with this, or at least that video was, whoever.
Well, it's funny you say that too, because I had a a clip of his queued up for this, just on exactly this, the rose windows and them being amplifiers. And I was like, I'm going to keep throwing it out there because he put it out there, and I think has some credence to it, even though he's going to poo-poo it away and say, oh no, I was under a spell when I created those 20 hours of documentaries.
Can I speak freely on your podcast?
Are you
Matt?
kidding me? Of course. This is it.
I think whoever Ewar is, and we don't know who he is, and that's fine. That's fine if he doesn't want to divulge his name. I think he's a narrator. I think he's a narrator, and there was a team that made those videos. And then I don't know what happened, if somebody decided the genie needed to be stuffed back into the bottle or what. But the recantation of the work does not match the sophistication of the work itself. And that to me is a dead giveaway that he's not the guy that actually came up with those ideas.
Correct.
I might be into him, but I think he's the narrator. I'm
with you 100%. And not one person cannot put together all that video.
Also, it's a lot of work.
Not happening. I mean, for me to put together you're doing it right here, this little 15 slide presentation. How many hours you put into this?
It's taken me days and days.
Yeah. And it would probably work out to maybe an hour and a half of, you just talking to it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, now multiply that by 10, 15, and now you're getting to what he did. It's like, yeah, I'm with you, because either you didn't do the research and you just narrated it, or you did the research and now you're just totally denying it, which, and his comebacks now, listen, I respect the work that they're doing, because they are going back and digging through the old truth, and they're proving their side of what they're trying to show, but they're using examples that are modern. So, I mean, yeah, you can do it modern. And granted, they could do things that were great back then too. You can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater.
It's like a little bit of a bait and switch going on there. Yeah,
and the whole flip-flop productions that he works for now, it's like, come on, man. Like, just stop. I get it. And to go so hard at us now. Like, he's going, autodidactic is like his number one target, and they just love him, and Wooden Nichols just tear up autodidactic all the time.
Well, and they're a little bit of an easy target because they lean hard into the Tartaria thing.
Heavy.
And so that, it's kind of like, you find the weakest link and just, use that to frame the entire field of researchers. And that's disingenuous.
Exactly. And that's my problem with it, is that now it's turned into a tit for tat, and they've both got distracted trying to go at each other instead of doing the work, which, by the way, is just what they want.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want us researching this stuff. They don't want us working together. They want us infighting. They want us to get off the track, because I really feel like we're getting closer than we've ever gotten.
I do too. I do too. I think we're over the target, and you know, and again, it's just like there's a large body of very intelligent, earnest, heartfelt, creative researchers that are coming at this from so many different angles.
Yep.
That it's just beyond, it's out, you know, the genie is out of the bottle, and it's not going to be stuffed back in. There's just too many people looking. There's too many eyes on it right now. You know, for myself, I like the term old world. I think, you know, you and I are simpatico on that, because I avoid Tartaria just because I don't know. I don't know if it was Tartaria. I like to think it was American, at least
I
the
have
stuff that I'm
found
looking at here.
zero, Matthew. I've read probably a dozen books pre 1900 on Tartary and Tartarians and Grand Tartary, and there's nothing there. There's nothing there. The Mongol Empire, man, let's give them credit for what they were. And I've been going back and forth with my buddy Dustin, who does bushwhacking buffalo on YouTube, does a lot of boots on the ground in Buffalo there, does great work. And we've been going back and forth on this because I'm done. You know, I can't deal with it anymore, with the fact that it's just like the Mongols aren't getting any credit anymore. It's all Tartarian. And it's like, guys, you got to give the Mongols credit. They went from, you know, Eastern Russia, China, all the way through the Middle East and conquered anything and everything in their path. And we're just going to overwrite it with Tartaria.
So isn't that what a red herring is?
Yes.
Like you're just creating this artificial construct that is easy to knock down.
Yep. And that's exactly it. Whereas, like I said, you said it great on Mark's show on and anybody that hasn't listened to that, by the way, go listen to My Family Thinks I'm Crazy that Matthew did, because he did a great job over there too. But they talked about it's the T word, you know, and I call them tartards now because people are so like want to cling to this. Now, hey, I got no problem if you're researching what we're researching and just using that because you want to bring people in. Fine, so be it. But if you're still clinging to this Tartarian civilization, I'm not buying it all the way. Like there has to be some evidence, and I have zero evidence that I've seen.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because I was looking for it, right? I mean, in the beginning, I was like, oh, this would be great, you know, a worldwide civilization. Now, am I discounting the fact that the world was interconnected at some point? No.
Right.
I think absolutely it was.
Right.
But was it under this Tartarian umbrella? Absolutely.
Yeah, ascribing it to Tartaria, I think it's a distraction.
Yep.
So, and thanks for your pitch for my podcast with Mystic Mark on My Family Thinks I'm Crazy. But a disclaimer about that: it was my first podcast, and I was as nervous as all get out. So I stumbled through a few things on that. But
hey, we've been there, you know, and I've done it too, where you get in there and you're like, okay, I got all these things I want to talk about. And then afterwards they stop recording. You're like, wait, I want to do this, and this. I forgot to talk about this. And it's like, oh, can we do a mulligan? Yeah. But listen, you dropped so much information on there. No one's going to notice. And you're just going to keep making appearances on people's pods. So it's only going to get better. And from what I've gotten feedback on our first one, it's and looking at the numbers, it's just climbing faster than any of the other recent podcasts I've done.
No, that's cool. Yeah. And you know, this information, it's getting out there, and it's great to be part of it.
Because we're presenting it genuinely, Matthew, and researched, right? We're not just making these off the cuff claims and, you know, doing some half-ass Google searches on this stuff. Yeah. I mean,
Matt, I'm a trained architect, and you know, I've been doing architecture for over 20 years. I've been building my whole life. Yep. When I look at these old world buildings and people just say, oh, you know, that was, you know, or like the World Fair is like, oh yeah, that was just like plaster and staff and bubble gum and duct tape. And it's just like, no, you don't know, you know, you have to, if you have a little building experience, you can have a greater appreciation of what you're looking at. And even if they were just models, let's say they were, for instance, full scale models, because that's what they'd be.
Yep.
You're not going to do that in the amount of time that they said so.
Nope.
They the Qatar World Cup. My kid was showing me a video of the stadiums. They built 8 stadiums. Okay, 8 buildings, right? For Qatar. It took them 12 years.
And by the way,
to build 8 stadium buildings.
Yeah, and by the way, one of those stadiums, okay, it probably holds around 100,000 if it's a modern stadium.
Right.
In Chicago, one of the buildings could hold 300,000 people.
I believe it was the manufacturer hall.
It was, yeah,
something like 14 acres or something like that.
Yep.
I mean, these are monumental structures. So, okay, let's say there are full-scale models built out of,
we're doing this in 2020 to, or 2010, they started Qatar, if they're getting it ready for 2022, 12 years with modern top of the line technology, right?
Building technology and equipment available.
Yep. Resources, materials, everything.
Yeah. Endless streams of immigrant labor, which is itself a sad story about that.
Well, slave labor over there.
Yeah. So here we are, just trying to get through a slideshow. So, looking at rose windows, and again, where do we see this kind of thing in nature? And it's just like the flower of life is the
where you
foundation
got
of
me.
sacred
This
geometry.
is Dr. Emoto.
Mhm.
Oh, yes, I love it. Go on.
Yes. So again, just re-emphasizing the case that these sacred structures are following nature's rules, following natural principles and natural order. And you can come up with all of the Platonic solids starting with the single point. And I just love that. I love that idea. You start with a point, and that's the void. And then you go out equidistant from there, and you get a circle, and you overlap the centers of 2 circles, and you get the Vesica Pisces. And it just goes on in self-similar fractal replication. You end up with the seed of life, the flower of life, and before you know it, you have it's Metatron's cube.
Yep.
And from there, the geometry, it jumps from 2-dimensional to 3 dimensions. It jumps off the page. Literally, it extrudes, and this is the beauty of the Platonic solids. In addition to the fact that they all fit within a sphere where the vertices all touch the edge of the sphere, they have that in common. But how they all are just extruded from intersecting lines on this Metatron cube, which comes from the fruit of life, connecting the centers of the fruit of life shapes.
Which is also the pattern that we see in our star forts.
Which is the patterns that we see in sacred structures across the realm.
All across, yep. It's the basis for it, at least, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the foundation. And when you start, it's like, I remember when I was studying in architecture school, and you take your architecture studio class, spend all your time there. You're trying to come up with a concept for a project or a model, and students would come in with all sorts of wild things, and we're in a sense, like, our minds were in it. I want to say, I wanted to say polluted, but really it's just like overloaded with what is presented as like the cutting edgest of architecture of this, with this deconstructivist stuff. And you go from modern architecture in our modern epoch, go from modern architecture with all its brutalism to this postmodernism with all its anything goes, pulling elements from everywhere and just mashing them together into whatever. Philip Johnson type stuff, and then you get into the deconstructivist stuff, which is just like it's like the end. And so you get what's his name, Peter Eisenman. Oh, this guy. He's like like the wannabe granddaddy of deconstructivist architect, although he hasn't really built much. His conceptual work has been hugely influential, and it's just this like this distorted dissonant type of it's the antithesis of everything that we're talking about here. These types of buildings are, well, you see them here in Seattle. It's like the Libeskind building, which is the did I get that right? Libeskind. The Seattle Library, and it's just disjointed and this and that. It's kind of a mild version of it, all the way up to, you know, like the Holocaust museums, and they're intentionally designed to create disharmony within the human spirit. Right, you find that in contemporary public sculptures that are put into, you know, town squares and cities all in Europe and the United States. These really kind of like jaggedy, you know, just dejected looking sculptures. And to me, that again, this is all part of the programming.
Yep.
You know, and so you're getting all this like input as an architecture student. You come into studio and it's like, you know, where do I begin? It's like, well, you know, this crumpled up tinfoil. You know, this is the inspiration, and then I'm gonna, like, you know, build a hospital around this. And this is what students are getting. This is the way their minds are being formed in architecture universities all over the place. And I now I find that to be such a shame, because something as simple as, you know, starting with the flower of life, it's such a simple concept, easy to learn, lifetime to master. You get infinite variety, the infinite variety of nature out of this, like out of a point in a circle. It's, how profound is that?
Yeah, and going back to what we talked about before, it goes back to the math, right? And them changing that in Common Core math, getting away from what's natural and giving you this thing to just disorient and take you away from the natural way of things, of operations.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I get it. I really believe in this because of the, you know, you look into Dr. Emoto's studies and you just think about, in general, negative thoughts, negative words, it has an impact.
Yes.
Positivity, positive thoughts, positive words, they have an impact on you. And that's true with everything. And we found that it's true with water, it's true with plants. It's been proven time and time again that our words are, it's vibrations coming out of our mouth, it's frequency coming out of our mouth that, you know, produces these sounds, and it has an impact on everything around us.
Yes. And water does have memory.
Yes.
And how does water have memory? It's the resonance of the vibration, positive or negative vibration, that's being sent to the water, that's then frozen, and the crystals of which are photographed by Dr. Emoto, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah, I just couldn't remember the name right. Yeah, and proving through experimentation that you know, anybody can do, where by sending negative thoughts and feelings, just thoughts and feelings to water, will negative ones will create really, you know, dissonant looking crystals. Positive, loving emotions will create beautiful, exquisite crystals. And again, going back to Ken Wheeler, he talks about the why, which is the H2O molecule. The memory is held in the space between the atoms. It creates a perfect the molecule creates a perfect 108-degree triangle, which when you break it down and, you know, strike your I forget my trigonometry right now, the line from the apex down to the bottom, you create a I would just put it this way simply: embedded in the geometry of the water molecule is a perfect representation of phi, of the Fibonacci golden ratio. And so it's a perfect antenna for to carry harmonics, to carry memory, to carry a resonant vibration, right? Which I guess is, when you get down to it, is what memory is in some way.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's what we're learning. It seems to be, and the crystalline structures are just amazing in the water as you see the different, like you were saying, different words, different emotions that we put into this. It's a phenomenal study. So anybody that hasn't checked it out, and Dr. Emoto is not the only guy that's done it. There's a lot of people that have done it. And you can look at it different ways too. You can look at it not only in the water, but you can look at it when they play church bells, and you can look at the effect that has on water. You can look at the organs, and they all tend to have a positive effect on the body.
Yeah. And speaking of organs,
Yes, look at these beasts.
pipe organs are marvels of instrumentation, sending sonic vibrations throughout cathedrals, with the rose windows acting as amplifiers.
Because what did we see before? Before we saw that the organ is on one end and the rose window is on the other. And as it travels down, it's going to amplify.
Yeah. Yes.
And the size, the sheer size of these organs, most people have gone to their local church and they've seen a church organ, a normal size one. These things, some of the pipes are up to like 100 feet long.
I've heard or read that some of these create up to 40,000 tones, and some of which are inaudible to the human ear. Why would you go through all that trouble and expense and cost and labor and everything to create tones that are inaudible if there wasn't some other purpose behind that?
Yeah, that's interesting. And an interesting story about organs too, with the St. Louis Fair and St. Louis World Fair in 1904. They had a huge organ brought in from California for the fair, and the maker of the organ went bankrupt making that organ for the fair. So they made the organ for the fair, gave it to the fair, and then went bankrupt and went out of business. It's like, very interesting.
It gets curiouser and curiouser.
Yep.
Well, so what did Tesla say? If we want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration.
Yep.
Right. And so here again, cymatic patterns are generated by planets, which is shown on the left, by musical notes in the center there, and even cross-section of DNA. We see cymatic patterns everywhere in nature that, coincidentally or not, look an awful lot like rose windows. Yeah. And then as a bonus, the harmonic vibrating labyrinths on the floors of cathedral are a wonder to behold.
Yeah, and you see those resemble computer pieces, right? They're
circuits. They're circuits.
They are a full circuit. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the ones in the middle, like if you go in the middle row, the second one down, the fourth one down, those have a very Mayan feel to them.
I was going to say, so yeah, I buy the story, the idea that, these represent the journey for those who can't go and actually do a pilgrimage, that they'll walk the labyrinth, and that's a meditation, and it takes into a very completely I love that idea. But also, like you said, they look a lot like, patterns that'll show up in Mayan, in South American native and artwork in my work with ayahuasca, the Shipibo tradition, they weave these extraordinary patterns, colorful patterns that they wear during ceremonies, that look an awful lot like some of these ones in the center. The more sort of rectilinear patterns there. So, when I close my eyes during an ayahuasca ceremony, this is kind of not unlike what I'll see.
Yes. Yeah, I either see something like this or something like the flower of life are the patterns that tend to prevail.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had experiences during ayahuasca where I could kind of see myself floating through the interior of cathedrals and just seeing all this sort of like crystalline forms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, those buildings, man.
Here's
Here we go.
our forts. So, once upon a time, entire cities were cymatic. And isn't that just mind-boggling? Isn't that just breathtaking to think that the old city states that, like, in our sort of like popular imagination, were just like these feuding fiefdoms with their, their local monarch, and all the kind of like negative connotation that goes along with it. And it's just, when you actually step back and look at the inception of many cities throughout Europe and elsewhere. Again, this book that we've been looking at, Cities of the World, one after another, and you realize that, holy smokes, these were the original layout of these cities was as like cymatic forms, with often a cathedral at the center of it and water running as a current through it and under it, and running water, creates electrical currents. So it's just, again and again, this idea that the old world structures, from the smallest aspect to the actual layout of the city themselves, had these natural patterns that really look like they're channeling electromagnetic energy.
Yeah, and if it wasn't a cathedral in the center, it was usually a water tower. Right. And so again, when we look at conductivity and it all falls right into line.
Yes. Beautiful.
And this has been one of Ewar's recent attacks, is star forts, because he found some recent examples of people redoing them, like Bortrange in the Netherlands. They redid it from 1960 to like 1980,
and it didn't turn on.
Well, of course not.
Well, you gotta believe.
But they, and that's why. And he's like, yeah, well, yeah, they built it. I'm like, yeah, I get that. They didn't. It's 1960. Okay, we're talking about 1500s and earlier. If you go in that Cities of the World book, because that's from what, 1570 to 16 something.
Yes.
So now I like what you have here, old Dresden. This is one that's a tragedy.
So I wanted to kind of like wrap this up. There's a couple more slides, but wrapping it up, I just wanted to take a moment and remember what it was like to live in an old world city that was intact. And yeah, Dresden's tragic that they just laid waste to this. And it's one example of, unfortunately, a great many, including, I believe, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, had no military significance, but they were also old world cities. And I, in researching this little aspect of the presentation, I was trying to decide, what city did I want to show that really exemplified this old world organization. And of course, Dresden, stood out, and I was happy I found these old postcards. But what also struck me was finding out that first Great Britain bombed, an old world city of Germany. And then Germany went and bombed an old world city of London. And they just went back and forth, tit for tat, not attacking military targets, but attacking their each other's heritage.
So Matthew, that's old world Nagasaki.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. So I found it in this book. It's Cities of Our World, but this is by Peter Whitfeld.
Okay.
So it's a little bit, I can't see it, damn it. But yeah.
You got to hold it in front of you. I found out that if you hold it right in front of you, the camera will pick it up.
There we go. Okay. So yeah, this is Cities of the World. Another one that's worth getting into. This has, I think it's like 50 or 75 old cities that it goes into. And like you said, when I saw Nagasaki in there, I was like, oh, now I know why they bombed it.
That's what they were doing. They were going tit for tat and attacking each other's their heritage centers.
Yeah, because they would have went for Tokyo. All right. I mean, Tokyo's the spot you're going for.
Yeah. To where you have to zoom out and wonder out loud if that wasn't at least, in some measure, the point.
Yep. Just like Dresden. You're absolutely right.
So I would be remiss if I didn't just take a moment again and really emphasize that this isn't just European. It's not just Western. This is ubiquitous. These sacred temples are around the world with so many different, local particular cultural expressions are exhibiting so many of these natural patterns that we've seen in the cathedrals, channeling energy, elevating the human mind, human body, the human spirit, lifting us up into a higher state of consciousness and connecting us with the divine, each in their own place, in their own way.
I think that's a great point right there. The disconnection from the divine. That's a huge part in this whole last 200 years of our history.
Yes. Separating spirituality from science was one of the worst tricks that they played on us.
Yep.
Because it's a false dichotomy. And hey, I'm a team player. The West, to me, is still the best.
Team Euro. And that's what drives me, nuts about our education system is that we are taught such a Eurocentric system that, it was basically just Greece and Rome. Mm-hmm. And then, we went on to the next, and it's like nothing was going on in India or China, really. China had some stuff going on, but you don't really need to know about that. In Japan, no, there was nothing in Japan. There was nothing in Southeast Asia or Africa or Latin America, South America, even. Just North America now. It was Europe, and then they decided to come over here and grace us with their presence and build out everything over here.
My wife is from Buenos Aires in Argentina, and I've been down there half a dozen times. And you want to take a field trip, man, and get your mind blown, because a lot of the old world architecture is still intact there.
Yep. Same with Brazil.
Yes.
I have one of my son's friends' parents owns a coffee business, and he goes down to Brazil all the time. I'm like, hey, did you ever go check out any of the old buildings down there? He's like, what are you talking about? So I showed him a couple pictures from our Cities of the Maps books and stuff like that. And he's like, no. I'm like, we'll do it and take pictures and bring it back to me. And he's like, oh, next time I'm going down there, he's like, and because his wife even said, because she's from Brazil, And she said, yeah, oh yeah, we have all sorts of old buildings down there.
Yeah. Yeah. There's parts of Buenos Aires that look like what's, the World's Fair behind you. It's just
Well, and what's interesting about
so
Argentina
beautiful.
is, right, that's where the Nazis went after World War
No,
II.
yeah, it's yeah, that's a sordid tale in itself, but yes, they did. Yeah, it's the most European. Argentina is the most European of the South American nations. Um, Matt, that's my presentation. We got through it.
Excellent. Hey, that is exactly what I think people want to see, because you broke it down in such a knowledgeable yet simplistic view. This guy, I've been looking at this stuff for probably 2 years. It's a drop in the bucket compared to what you've been doing. But to start seeing this and making it simple for people is what we need, because this is a very, very deep concept, a very hard concept to understand if you're not familiar with it. And it's easy to just write off right away because it sounds out
Yes.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of it does sound very woo woo. And, there's a lot of cul-de-sacs in this research pursuit, right? There's a lot of, like we were talking about, the Tartarian distraction. And, you get into all sorts of weird stuff when you start looking into these things. And maybe that's, at least a little bit the point of like why certain things are promoted and pumped and by the algorithms and stuff. And but my sort of bumper rails, my guide in approaching this work is stones don't lie.
Yep.
Like you can point all day long to the literature or to textbooks or to expert opinion, but stones don't lie. And I can walk down to downtown Seattle and see, compare what I see with what the history books say went on. And I can go take a tour of the underground and then read, listen to the explanations of how they raised the city after the fire, after they rebuilt it, and then they raised it again. And it's just like starts, I can just kind of put it side by side and just look at what my eyes don't lie, and I believe them. I believe what I see, and I can put my hands on. So that's been a really kind of helpful way to approach it for me. It keeps me honest, and it keeps me from straying too far into the weeds.
Yeah. And it's difficult, right? Because I truly want to believe the fantastical, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just,
It's fun.
deep down inside, it's like that kid in me wants to believe in the fairy tale, that they, but in there's a part of me though, using my better judgment, that still believes in more, right?
Yeah.
That believes that there is stuff that's been hidden, and the research that we're doing is slowly chipping away at that to prove that we're not crazy, and that we're not just shooting off the cuff with this stuff, that it's verifiable.
Yeah, and the truth really is stranger than fiction when it comes to
Yes, without a
stuff.
doubt. And they've programmed us to believe the opposite, that the strange is just the movies, it's just on TV, it's just in the black box, it's not in reality.
Yeah. Now, Matt, I promised you some pictures of old world Newark.
Yes.
Why don't you type in old world Newark buildings and see what comes up,
All right.
since you got the controls.
All right, let's see what we get for Newark here.
I stopped sharing the screen, right?
Yes.
Excellent.
Oops. All right, here we go. All right, so what are we pulling up here? We've got the Prudential
There.
building.
Click on that one. Look at that thing.
Wow.
What?
Ah, it took me to Reddit. Damn it. I want to see. Wow. Look at that castle.
I had no idea.
Oh
I
my
had no idea. That
God. That's the Prudential building.
that's what they say.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, you look at that thing and look at the size, the scope of it.
Yeah, the scale of it.
I mean, that's just breathtaking. For anybody that's just listening, I mean, this is a monstrosity. This thing is, it looks like a
It's like
castle.
it's a castle skyscraper.
Yeah, yeah,
It's looking
that's a great description. All right, let's see what else we can find here. What do we got? Do.
I found my collection. If I could share a screen again and
Yeah,
just
go right ahead here because I'm coming up empty. I went to Google. I was just stupid.
so share screen and blam. Did that work?
It's coming. Yep, we're good. Oh, look at this.
So that's the one we just looked at.
Okay.
This gem is on Broad and Market. Now this blew my mind because I've been on Broad and Market many times and there was no trace of this sucker.
Yeah. I mean, you even the intricate detail on the roof
Yeah,
with the statue they put up there and the little spires they have.
yeah, all this like antiquitechy type,
Yeah.
railing work on the roof. Let's see. These old postcards are fantastic, aren't they? Here again, this is Broad Street, and it's just like one after another.
Yep. Yeah, just look down the row. It's just a row of beautiful old buildings.
And oh, by the way, the trolley system,
There's no wires.
no wires.
Amazing how that works. Look at all these old buildings.
It's stunning. This one is still here, the Lackawanna station. Fortunately, not all of them were torn down. Post office,
High school. High
right?
school.
Because
Right?
that's what you do when you build a high school.
That's what Michelle Gibson talks about all the time. Is that especially down in like Texas, they have these huge old world high schools.
Yeah. Have you seen pictures of old Galveston?
Yes.
It's just like this.
Before the hurricane.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at that. Wow. Life insurance. Yeah.
Now this is here. This is the Essex County Courthouse. That one's still there. Red brick, City Hall. Now this City Hall. Now I have to go back there with the new eyes, the new lens that I'm looking at things through now. Because when you look at these steps that go up, there's always been this weird depression down here. Like these windows go down. So this is like a level.
There's usually like an alley down there, right?
Yeah, you can drive. There's like a driveway that goes down underneath these steps and then back up the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very strange. And now that I look at that with this whole like mud flood idea in mind, that there was maybe some kind of liquefaction event that changed where the entrances were placed in the street levels, which gets back to Seattle's silly history. New York was an absolutely breathtaking, beautiful old world city.
But you know what the thing is? The more I look into it, a lot of cities were like this that we wouldn't even have a clue about.
Can you imagine if they built high schools like this now?
Yeah. Or go look at like old Baltimore is another one. That's one that like I was like, Baltimore. No wonder why it's a crack den now. I mean, anything that was take all of your ghetto cities now, and at one time they were beautiful.
Yeah, the cities were left to rot. They were left to decay. They were abandoned. Detroit.
Yeah. Oh, that's a big one.
Right? But it goes on and on. It goes on and on.
Wow.
There it is. There it is. That's what I think this is Sacred Heart. It's a stunning building. And again, I'm embarrassed to say I did not visit it. I didn't.
And it's
At
got
least I
the
didn't go
copper
inside.
roof. Copper's not very conductive.
Right.
They just put it up there for decoration.
And then
Yep.
I took this photo myself.
That's what you start seeing nowadays.
I took this photo myself because the last trip I took there, I was like, hey, wait a minute. What about all these old world buildings? And this is what I found.
Yep.
And to its credit, the current mayor, Raz Baraka, I worked on his political campaigns when I lived in Newark, and I was more politically active. There's a big grassroots campaign that got him elected. He's the son of Amiri Baraka, who's, you know, he wrote the book Blues People back in the 60s. And anyway, long legacy of, you know, civil rights and so forth in that family, in the Baraka family. So Raz got elected. He's the mayor of the city now, and to their eternal credit, they are making efforts to revive, or at least restore in some measure, some of the old building stock that's left. There's this one you could look up called, what's that? Oh, it's a beautiful thing. There's one called the Kruger Scott Mansion, which you could look up. And it's just a beautiful old world red brick building that they're restoring, and they're turning into I believe a community center. But yeah, that's it. That's Newark today. Sad to say, and it's a common story. But
yeah, like you say, go to Detroit, go to Baltimore, go to San Francisco. Yeah. You're going to see all the same stuff.
Yeah. And, you know, it didn't make sense to me for a very, very long time, where I'd say, you know, I'd ask myself again, the Gilded Age, they built all this splendor only to abandon it.
Yep.
How does that make sense? Unless they weren't connected to it at all because they didn't build it. So they had no pride in ownership. They were like, they used it until they were done using it, and then they went out to their private islands or wherever.
Yep.
The wealthy goes.
Yeah, and then they destroy it and change code and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow. Hey, that was a great presentation, man. Thank you.
I've been waiting for actually a few years for somebody in this community to talk about Newark, and nobody has. So I'm happy to be the first. I feel
we might have to do a dive into Newark. That might be one on the horizon here.
Yeah, there's it's a fascinating history. And growing up in New Jersey, like it didn't strike me as odd that there would be old world buildings, because Newark itself, it's one of the, if not the oldest city in the country. It's like 350 years old. And there's been,
well, it's Newark, right? They wanted to create the Newark there.
That was the idea.
Yeah.
Now, you got to be careful, because there is a Newark, Delaware.
Yes.
You're from the East Coast. You know what state you're from by how you pronounce
how
Newark.
They pronounce it. Yep. I've traveled through there many a times. So anything else you want to get out?
Well, geez, I mean, just to kind of recap, you know, again, this idea of, I think that researchers into old world architecture and megalithic architecture, you know, even if people are into this idea of Tartaria or what have you, I really think that it would benefit the community to spend some time with this electric universe theory, because I really believe that this is it's like a missing link in helping us to sort of like understand what this old world architecture was doing. You know, what was it doing?
The purpose, right?
the purpose of it. Yeah. And so I hope I succeeded in at least, you know, in sort of orienting more people in that direction. But I think that we need to acknowledge that the ether is real. Any science that denies the existence of the ether is just off on a wrong track, and it's destined to ultimately fall apart. And I think, again, I think that's what we're witnessing. And the idea that spirit and matter or spirituality and science are antithetical to each other is a false dichotomy. It's a deception. And I think it's
Yep.
doing us a great disservice.
And the thing is, the truth can stand up to the questions. The
Yeah.
lies, they always fall apart, because what do you need to do? You need to create more lies to cover up your lies. And that's what we're finding, is that as you dig through this and you start getting back to the source materials, you start seeing the narrative changed, and the narrative shifted significantly, and there was a reason for it. And, there's something being hidden. What is what we're digging for?
That's it. And we're just digging. We're
Yeah.
asking questions.
Yeah, and that's it. And like you said, I want more people to get into this, because I want to get more into the electric universe, because I do think you're onto something. I think there is a tie here to tie in all the loose ends that we're trying to fit into this old world bucket. And I think this does a great job of giving us another perspective to understand how it all worked together and how this came about and how it is natural. It's not as unnatural as some may think. These are natural geometric patterns.
Yeah. And I will say this much. I think for certain, if the universe is electric, the old world architects, builders knew it.
Yes.
They knew it well.
Oh yeah. Because they had to. They had to know it, to be able to build a building, right? And well, design it first, then build it, physically build it. They had to have this. So
with the characteristics that these old world structures, sacred temples and sacred buildings show.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Matthew. Oh, this was great, my friends.
It's been a pleasure, man.
You want to tell the people where they can find you or reach out?
Well, people can find my architecture work at dreamdesignbuild.org. I have a personal sort of art and pontification website that I just launched. It's at matthewrsmith.art, A-R-T. And I'm on Instagram at Yurt Designs.
Matthew, thank you very much, my friend. This was excellent. And we will definitely be getting together again, because we got much more to uncover in this old world. So thank you, my friend. I appreciate your time and all your great effort. This was a great presentation. Likewise, everyone go support Matthew and all his great work. If you're interested in a yurt, check it out. All right. Stay strong and question everything.